So speaking of set one,
Yeah, very true. The notes here, I got the rundown. We got just some key mechanics and concepts. So I just want to cover kind of like obviously like probably what we consider staples. Like I know if like for sure probably I was gonna say 10Ks are staple, right? That's the first four cards you put in your deck, that kind of thing. I mean just the idea of the mechanics. I mean obviously like most of these things like negates and stuff like they were pretty commonplace since that one. Obviously like we're starting to find that you can play more aggressive strategies and people are starting to side deck their negates, or even if you're playing best of one versus best of three, these are things you have to consider too, right? Like you probably can't afford to not run like negates in your main board based on your local meta, especially if you're playing best of one. But like in best of three, you have more options, more leeway. But yeah, we can just go over some of these. We can talk about kind of their relevance in set one, and then I mean we can see if we think it's changed a little bit in set two. We can touch on that too. But really, I guess kind of the main headlining thing I wanted to touch on a little bit was probably just like overall game mechanics a little bit to a certain degree, just being like the concept of awakening was like I think that's one part about this game that's incredibly unique is kind of the idea that like you can't just be aggro. Like it's not like where you have like a finite life total and like you're just taking damage and there goes 10% of your life. It's not magic where you just have 20 and you go to 0 and you're done. Taking damage gives your opponent resources in this game. So I think the first challenge that a lot of us here, at least, were learning was with the game was, especially the fact that the demo deck gives you like the double strike Goku, where just like you just wanted to attack all the time, right? Like, oh, well, if I get his 8 gone first, like I'm gonna win. But it seemed like Awakening first was like huge in when we were learning the game. So like you put him to 5, and then it'd be did they draw their Furious Yell, that kind of stuff. So if you guys just want to touch a little bit on Awakening, and I know like kind of like I know Dusty, you guys were always talking about like you need to have a game plan, and your game plan should include either your leader giving you capability or having some outs in your deck to get yourself awakened. Because the kind of the set one strategy that I saw a lot was the idea of leaving your opponent at 5, kind of building that board, collecting your resources to try to make like the final push, or to set yourself up in a way where you can make a push and you're sure you're not going to get killed on the revenge swing, right? So how important did you guys find awakening to be in set one? And I guess if you want to even talk about your experience learning the game, if you guys, I mean, for me it was kind of an interesting idea to figure out that it was like a tempo game more so than just like a you build your deck in a way to outrace your opponent. Like you might like aggro wasn't good in this game, which was interesting to me because I've always liked combo decks, control strategies, more intricate decks rather than just playing like a burn deck, right? So to me, it was really interesting that this game had the mechanic of awakening, where you're gaining 2 cards and then you're gaining an advantage every turn when you're awakened. So to me, that was just to learn that was kind of like the big step into the game. To feel like I understood and that I could see things differently than other players, knowing that awakening was so huge and pivotal in that set one for me.
Or actually, you can go, Dusty.
no, you go. You're the set one champion. You go.
Yeah. So yeah, set one. So like when I first started making my videos, actually when I first started playing the game, I remember at our locals, everyone kind of just like attack, and that was like just the way the game was played. You just attacked your opponent. And then I remember during one of my tournaments, I had this aha moment, and I was like, man, what if I just like never attack you? What happens? Like, where do your cards go? Like, you have no draw power. Like, nobody's playing Results of Training, and that was like my favorite card in set one. I'm like, I played it in like every deck that wasn't Vegeta, and early on, no one was really thinking of Ginyu because Vegeta and Ginyu were the only ones that could actually self-awaken. So if you weren't playing those two leaders, you had to play Results, and people that just didn't click with people. People were like, oh, this is a stupid card. It's a dead card, and I'm like, man, Awakening is the most important part of the game. Like, if you don't awaken, I can beat you I can beat you I can beat you from like 5 to 0 and keeping you like card locked, keeping you at 5 forever. And like you said, or like when people have the Kabas or the Furious Yells, you can keep them at 6 locked. But then I'm like, what if I took it a step further and I kept you at 8 lock and I just locked you at 8? And then I have 7 drop Beers to you. And if you're never going to awaken, you're going to lose cards eventually, or you're going to stop playing energy. And then I took it one step further and it's like, man, what if I added hand destruction to that and never attacked you? And I just kept ripping your cards out, and then I just Beers you. And I did that to my locals like after I had that aha moment, I did that to my locals like constantly, and then that forced everyone to either play Vegeta or start playing Results of Training. And then when I traveled to the States, it's like to the shop championships, it still hadn't clicked with some of these locals, and I was like, man. And like I remember playing some of their guys, and like, oh, they were saying like they're champion at their locals, they're the best player, and I would play them in the finals. And I'm like looking, I see his first energy and his second energy. And I'm like, man, what is your deck, and how are you winning these? Like, how are you winning these tournaments? And then I remember I played. I think it was a Brawly player, and then like his first like 3 energy were pure green. I'm like, huh. So you're not playing any blue, so you're probably not playing results. And then I'm like, I win. You know, like I auto win. It's like I just wait for my burst and I win. And yeah, and then later I started clicking with people, and then you start seeing. Well, I think that's why Vegeta was so heavily popular, because of his ability to self awaken, and that's what made him so strong. But then when people like Jordan started playing, when he popularized Ginyu, and it's like, oh shoot, there is another leader in the set that can actually self awaken and is actually better than. Like, I think Ginyu by the end of set 1 was better than Vegeta.
Ooh, do you think it's better?
Yeah, well, Ginyu, I went like undefeated with Ginyu once Jordan came up with his build. Like, I tried to make that build too, but I just couldn't make it click. And then when I saw Jordan's build and I started playtesting with it, I'm like, okay, this is why it works. And then, yeah, and that's like I basically swept through like the states. Like I went through.
Swept through America. Yeah.
I went to Buffalo, Detroit, Pennsylvania twice, Ohio. I did play my Soul Striker a lot too because it was just really fun. But for the most part, I was playing Ginyu, and I was just like, and then people would even pick up my Ginyu card and be like, what does this do? And I'm like, you don't know what this does? And I'm like, oh man, I win. If you don't know how this works, I win. You know?
Buckle up, buddy. Yeah.
when set 2 came out, like before, like I think set 2 came out not too fast or too slow, whatever. But I think the meta still could have developed even further in set 1. That's how many different things you could have played. Because when in my locals, when Ginyu became popular, all of a sudden Soul Striker became popular because I thought Soul Striker was one of the best leaders in set 1, and people kept calling me crazy, and I was like, man, this is outside of the only reason he wasn't seen so much is because he like hard counted by Vegeta, which is Vegeta was so popular. The Soul Striker just destroys everything. It felt like at that time. And
I'll tell you, you know, I think the best card in freaking set 1 was that like we don't even talk about it all right now is Vados, like the not the like leader, but like the bewitching god Vados. Like that card was absurd.
Yeah.
That card just like took over the game. Like you could Cobalus it, but then like it just next turn it was like, I'll see you next turn, Daddy.
Yeah.
It's, like, it's fine, but Cobalus me, it doesn't matter. And it's like, man, that card was absurd.
And actually, that's why I think in set 1 at least I loved Crusher Ball a lot more because there's a lot more Crusher Ball targets. Especially for that Vados, and I think that was another thing why Red was kind of like Champa was kind of popular because he did kind of was able to pressure the Vegeta in a sense, but I feel like just Vados. I mean, he just lost to. Like,
I can never understand Champa. First of all, I was never a fan of Champa.
Yeah,
because like I always thought Champa like has no way to awaken. His abilities like not that great, and like I mean, it just felt like he had to have Kaba or he just lost. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I played against a lot of Champas, and I never.
It's a good player thing, I think.
I think Champa's like it's kind of one of those things that like it seems so like attractive and like good when you look at it at like a surface level. Champa versus hand destruction is like you just like get blood cards to protect your threats like left and right. You run out of stuff like that. I don't think Champa versus Ginyu when you know what's going on is good. But like when everyone was starting to learn and you see that Champa can give all of your things double strike. Like I remember playing my first ever tournament with this game and like I hadn't been planning on going, so I ended up just like showing up to a buddy's house. Like he gave me like Majin Buu's like negates, and I just like shoved together 2 demo decks, and I just rolled like a blue-green Goku deck, and like I managed to top 8 somehow. But I remember like distinctively playing my first game versus Champa, and when he awakened and started giving all of his things double strike, I thought it was just you could give Champa double strike, right? So like there was just this moment where I probably looked like I was a deer in the headlights when I was like, oh, like. He just hit Vados and hit like a hit. I was just like, oh man, there's like 10 damage on board potentially. Like, how am I going to win this game? And like, it seems so overwhelming and like it looked very appealing, I think. And I think when people were new to the game, not understanding the power of awakening and that you can't just like give your opponent cards and cards and cards was just like, it just seemed way, way good, right? But I think you do challenge versus crit and stuff. I think punishes Champa a lot because you attack with your Kaba, right? But like, are you going to protect your Kaba? Like, it's super good when Kaba just draws you 2 cards with Champa, but you can't afford to just spend those 2 cards every turn to protect it, or you're not really getting an advantage at that point. So, yeah.
I mean, I guess the thing with Kaba is it does draw you 2 cards essentially. So you can, like,
Kaba is super good in that deck.
Yeah, is using like in set 1 you can use the red negate, and you can protect Kaba that way, which is pretty powerful.
That was a good play for sure.
Yeah, you can also use Zarbon or whatever as a combo card to save him too, and that readies them afterwards. So And there is ways to protect them, and I think that's something that we didn't discover a lot in set one. Like the Daniel was talking about, is like maybe we could have abused Kaba more than we did.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that set two really did, is it gave us more ways to self-awaken. I mean, Tien being the most notable, but also like the dash back Goku was another really good way to self-awaken as well. So, but Jordan, whenever you said good players, do you mean like good players play Choppa, or like that's like?
No, I said that's why we're good players because we.
Ouch.
Here we go. Dude, I like Choppa. Oh, fat cat, man.
Actually, I remember in set one, I kept seeing a bunch of posts like, or man, Choppa's so good, or Choppa's one of the best leaders. I'm like, man, what are you guys playing at your locals? How is Choppa winning your locals?
Yeah, well, like, was it Anthony Hernandez had played Red Blue Choppa at like Gen Con or whatever, and like I think people saw like, one of the first big events, like Choppa had a decent showing, right? And I think like when people didn't have product like around here, like I was just like religiously just scanning the group to just find out how the game was going, right? So just like when you don't have any like thing to base your knowledge on, I think just like the actual just power of information there, like even like without even playing the deck, you just take, hey, this band topped a 200 person event, right? Like there has to be some good to the deck, but I think that was kind of before even I understood like how much play skill can be like exploited in this game. Like I think the degree of a player you are like in this game is way more important than other games. So
Vados is like literally like okay, how like the local meta went in my local was it started like with like blue obviously because blue was really good. Then it went to like blue red Vegeta with like a Vados engine, and basically like if Vados resolves and like hits 2 threats, it's like almost impossible for you to win.
Yeah, it was so hard to dig out of those.
So like basically what happened is our meta shifted just to blue yellow. Like me and Zach, we played a blue yellow Vegeta deck, and we played it at like a 1K in New York. Anyway, but yeah, Crusher Ball just destroys Vados. Like you Crusher Ball, they just paid 5 mana for nothing, and it's cool how the meta game evolved. And like Danny was saying, like maybe if set 2 didn't come out for another month, maybe it evolved even a step further. And that's just like with this game, like there's just so much depth. It can just keep going and going and going. There's endless amounts of decks that you can build.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a perfect. I mean, because like that's the thing is like we were seeing like deck shift even before set 2, and even now in set 2 we still see it happen. Like the same leader has not won any of the regionals. It's been a different leader every time. That's a big freaking thing. Because like that's something you don't normally see in games like this, especially when the same players are topping. Like literally the same players are topping and they're playing different decks each time. So it's not like like even Marcel, who's like probably the best Vegeta aggro player in the game right now. He's played like 3 different versions of that deck at 3 different regionals. Like he's like not even playing the same.
And done deck consistently great. Like right,
definitely. Absolutely. You know what I mean? That's and same thing with set 1. So you have like Vados, which like Jordan said like Crusher Ball is very good against, but you also had Hand Destruction, which I still think was the best deck in the format. I can't believe that Danny just said that it was Ginyu. Like,
hey, to be fair, he just said Ginyu, right? And I know people were on like Ginyu Hand Destruction builds at the end, so like maybe that's just the answer right there. Like,
I mean, Jordan's the Ginyu master. Like, how bad is Ginyu Hand Destruction 1 to 10?
In set 1, I never played it.
Right.
But there's no way you can play a tricolor. There's just not enough. I don't think you can feasibly flip 3 colors in that deck with Brawly being 4 mana. Big Brawly being 4 mana. Right. So I did play it as green-yellow, and it was just underwhelming. Blue's so good, and you can't run blue-green. It's like, It's like Mecha Frieza is kind of like the leader that helped that out, because now you can just play green and blue, and then just have Frieza catch your extra cards. And so like if you want to like, that's the deck that kind of I wanted to build but cannot, because there's just not enough room in your deck. Like you just can't do it. Yeah,
I mean, just to really quickly go over it, I guess it's like. Even like there's just something about the way this game plays out from a high level that's so interesting to me, because I've never played I think because the game is so consistent, it makes it a lot funner to play, because people have certain things in their hand, or the things that they want in their hand they can go search out, and so you're playing around it for a reason. Like in Magic, the game was so inconsistent that it felt like it was stupid to play around things because there's a huge chance they don't have them. But in this game, it feels like that they always have them in their hand. And so, like, for example, if you're playing Hand Destruction, right? Like, against certain decks, you can play Broly turn 1. But if you're playing against a yellow deck, you can't, because they can use Goldo turn 1, tap your Broly, and kill it. And then you can't evolve it. You know what I mean? And that was, like, a huge mind game. So I look over, if my opponent's not playing yellow, I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm going to play out Broly. But then if I play Broly and my opponent has green, I can't attack into them because they'll have full power energy. They can kill my Broly with that. And so there's just like all these things you have to play around, and it's pretty likely that they're going to have. I mean, did you guys have that same experience as well?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Yeah, same, dude.
You got to see what, like, you have to wait. You almost have to wait until they play the first couple energies to kind of understand what they're trying to do, what their deck looks like. And then for the most part, if you're playing a good player, you should know what his deck is. It's when you play these random players that are playing random decks that kind of takes you an extra turn or two to be like, hey, what is this guy trying to do? And kind of prepare yourself. And usually you can beat those rogue decks. Just like there's a lot of like, I feel like you have to adapt while you're playing, like just like while you're in the game. Because sometimes I get caught off guard where somebody plays. I expect them to be playing something on this should be your turn 4 play. If this isn't your turn 4 play, I'm probably gonna win this game. And then they play something completely left field, and I'm like, oh shit, what the hell is this? You know, like,
gotta figure this out.
Yeah, and then you gotta figure out how they're trying to win, and then obviously play around that. And that's why this game is great because there's so many different decks, and you really have to know the meta, and basically actually not even just the meta. You have to know all of the cards. There's a lot of times when people pick up my cards and read my card. I'm like, the second they start reading my card, I'm like, oh man, I won this game. If you don't know what this does, I win.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, if you're from the European players, I mean, that's why I think Vegeta is the best leader in set 1 because you never knew which version of Vegeta you're playing against. You sit down across from Ginyu, you're like 90% sure they're playing Tricolor Ginyu, right? Yeah. If you're sitting down across from Soul Striker Goku, you know the type of deck he wants to play, the kind of game plan he wants to play. You sit down from Vegeta, you have no idea. And sometimes you don't even know until like the second or third turn of the game until he plays the second energy, right? Because he could be playing Vados Vegeta, he could be playing the blue-yellow tempo Vegeta with like Crusher Balls and stuff that was actually really, really good. I actually think Trey took that to the first ARG event and did really well. I think he won the event. And then you had Hand Destruction Vegeta, which played completely different. You know, it was just like, it was such an awesome meta, and it still is in set 2, which is like blows my mind that they continue to keep it like as diverse as they do.
Touching on a little bit of what Danny said in terms of like trying to figure out what people are playing, like I think people in like Europe and getting into the game now, they're picking those things up. Like if you're playing like a fixed set 1 meta, but you have an idea of like what things are good already, like when we started playing locally and like we had people come for like, I traveled like an hour and a half for my first event, and we had people come from like Illinois to play. Everyone was pretty new. Like most people were just playing whatever leader they thought was the coolest, right? Like we had one guy that just like loves Gohan as characters. Like he was just on Gohan. We had all these different decks. Like there was a few, like we might have like 4 people playing Broly out like a 20-person event. Like that was probably like the most consistently played leader, but like we've probably had at least 3/4 of the like different leaders represented in that tournament. And it was just like really interesting to see what people are valuing, because like our idea was like we ended up playing best of 3 like hour rounds, right? So everyone's like playing was like, oh, like Champa's really aggro, so like my sideboard just gonna be a bunch of blockers. Well, we know now that like blockers were pretty bad for card advantage in set 1. They didn't do enough. Like you basically just like diverted an attack and like discarded a card for the most part. It's like you'd see some people whose thought process was just like, well, if they can't attack my leader, they can't win. So like their deck is like tricolor with like, you know, you got Vados Assistance, you got your Whis' Coercions, your full powers, like their sideboard's just like full of blockers. And like it was really interesting to see everyone's like take on what they thought was good. And like you'd see people playing weirder card choices, and then there's a few more people that were a little bit more tuned in, so you'd see them playing like Broly with like mono green, Broly with like the Broly engine, and like they were really in on like the, you know, they had more focused deck that was focused around, you know, destroying their hand. So like some people were just playing like, hey, let me just play all the cards that I think look strong. And then some people were playing like theme decks. Some people were playing what they wanted. So I think it was just like really, it's probably not something that we're going to see again. Like, I don't think Europe's going to run into this like, hey, look, this local's every leader possible. And like, I have no idea what my opponent's playing.
Oh, really?
Like,
I think they absolutely will. I think they absolutely will run into that. It's so easy to do in this game because there's so many different leaders and there's so many different possibilities that like you said Gohan. I actually forgot about Gohan, but he was actually awesome there for a while.
Like if I were to be a player in Europe, I think what I would start doing if I was trying to innovate and find a deck that's not like Ginyu or Vegeta was probably Gohan, because that's like the only leader from set 1 that can really like have some sort of advantage and like pressure on their front side, in my opinion. So I think he was probably not explored enough, at least around my area in set 1. And I've even been thinking about trying to build a Gohan deck in set 2, because I think with some of the stuff that you can to play in that deck and some of the options you have now with like revenge blockers being good, where you can protect your Gohan and basically remove the threat, like I think there could definitely be some potential there. So
actually for set 1 potential, I think that if we played the set a little bit more is of Vados, because I remember when the game, okay, outside of like Vegeta, how you can self awaken. Actually, it doesn't matter. When you're awakened, all right, you want to. The benefit of being awakened is when you can attack and draw. Now, a lot of the times it's like if you lock your opponent at 8, especially in my meta, you lock your opponent at 8, then if you attack them, yes, you draw a card, but you give them a card. So obviously, you never kind of want to give them a card unless you're attacking them with crit, which really only Vegeta could do, or the 3-drop Vegeta. Now Vados, I remember taking this to my locals because I was like, man, because I got stuck in a game against I was Gohan versus Soul Striker, and neither of us wanted to attack each other because we didn't want to give each other cards, so we would kind of just attack each other's battle cards and to get cards. And then when somebody would leave no battle cards up, I'm like, man, I guess I have to give you a card and attack. But then with Vados, you can just attack anything. You can just attack their battle cards while standing and still get that card advantage without giving them any card advantage. And I think if the meta developed a bit more, Vados could have been at least the Vados I was playing could have been something great for set one.
Absolutely, it's another reason why Vegeta was so good, right? Because he attacks you with critical, and then he gets to draw the card. So he's not giving you that card. And also the good thing about Vados, when she awakens, it's a 20,000 attack on the front if she's attacking a battle card. So that killed almost everything that was played except like Super Saiyan Goten was like the only card that didn't kill. So
and I think that's what makes Soul Striker being like. That's why Soul Striker was real. I think that's why Soul Striker was great now and a great set one, because that 20k body is people don't realize how powerful that 20k body actually is.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. What do you guys think were the most trappy leaders in set one? So I have like two. That I can think of.
You say trappy, like
if a new player was playing in set one, I would be like, don't play these leaders. Like, they're bad. Don't try.
For me, I think I don't think it was bad, but I think it was overhyped. I guess it was the Brawly leader. I
think Broly is the worst leader in set one.
Yeah, I didn't like. Well, actually, there's like Green Goku who's pretty bad.
yeah, I don't know. Like that one, there wasn't like too many like leaders that I played, but Brawly was like the very first one I played. And I don't know, I kind of got trapped a little bit because like Vegeta was just like the best leader, but I think like if Vegeta hadn't existed, like the critical aspect and everybody just playing Vegeta, like against the other decks in the format, I thought Brawly was pretty alright. But he definitely was a trap at the beginning because like you just played against a bunch of Vegetas and you just died.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because like not being able to attack a battle card is a huge downside.
Yeah, like you're just like amplifying your like weakness as for hand destruction already by like not being able to attack battle cards, and then like once you're awakened, you can't even develop your own board to deal with their threats either. Like, I definitely think I would agree with Broly being kind of the trappy leader, and I know like at least locally we had. Like at our first tournament, like none of us really knew what we were doing, but like some of the people that were more focused in like, hey, like Broly, his synergy of his leader and his battle cards, just like they're all hand destruction. So like it was just kind of like an easy like themed put together deck. So like they did well because I think it was just more synergy based rather than like Broly being the deck. But like I think the not attacking battle cards, once people started like playing in a way where they were valuing their life or they'd leave their stuff up to make you attack into it. And then like Broly not having the option at all to bully the field, like you just leave your like self with, you're giving your opponent accesses that they can attack you on that you can't deal with, which I think is just like inherently like a good way for if you're playing versus a strong opponent for them to find a way to beat you. And I do think that Broly was probably like, he seems really good because like I think when people realize that like Awakening is good, like card advantage is huge. Seeing Broly that you can take their cards away like is pretty attractive. But I tried playing Broly and like I could not for the life of me ever mulligan into like a Broly's ring. So like for me the deck always just felt like tier 3 at best because like I was never hitting where I could ever attack with Broly and not discard my own cards either. So like I hated that deck. I tried so long to make that feel right for me. I tried all the different sorts of counts. I tried playing every card that could draw me a card. Like I tried straight green, blue green. Like I just could not find that deck in a way that it felt like good to me really. So yeah, I definitely would have to agree that I think Broly was probably like the one thing that people like you'd hear like Broly has busted, like Broly's so good, and like I just never felt like it was that great, especially if you never saw your rings and stuff, because you just didn't have like anything that like you didn't get value out of the discard pile. You couldn't develop a board when you're awakened. Like it was cool to be like not awakened, and if you awaken them, you could just always attack with your 10,000 and their 15 and discard a card and not give them anything. Some of the better players I saw playing Broly were just like they were really hesitant to awaken because they realized like, hey, if I'm at 10,000, I can bully an awakened leader and like they're never gonna get their resource back. So I don't know. It just like played so like in such a constricted manner that I think that's really what did it in for me, at least, of not an option that I wanted to explore that I valued as a good leader, I guess.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing against Broly is like, other than the fact you can't attack battle cards, which I think is like super important in this game, is be able to put pressure on opponent's battle cards, but also like you have to run, and like this is the other thing about this game. It's a 50 card deck, and so having to run like Broly's rings and like I don't know the guy's name. What's his dad's name? It's like
Paragus.
Yeah, Paragus. Right, having to run him is just like terrible. Like you have to essentially put slots into your deck that like it's already a limited deck into like just to do this thing that like Vegeta just does better in my opinion. So like I don't know, it just seemed very. You have to like essentially do too many resources. I think another was Beerus for me. When I first saw Beerus's card, I was like, "This is broken." Like, what do you mean? What do you mean he just gets to attack her and move something from the board? This is absolutely absurd. But like another thing about this game is like all the guys have haste. So like they literally do something. Like they come into play, they attack you, and then even if you kill them, like your opponent usually gets some kind of value out of them, right? And so like that was another big trappy card for me in like set one.
Yeah, the thing with I think the big thing about Brawly 2 is there was a lot of bad builds out there. I think in set 1, no matter what deck you played, it felt like you had to play blue. You couldn't just go mono red, mono green, or you probably couldn't go mono yellow. And like whenever I would see a mono deck, like if I played a Brawly in one of the shop championships, and it was like near the finals, and his first like 3 energy were green, and I'm like, man, if you're not playing blue, then you can't awaken. And then I asked him afterwards. I'm like, well, how do you awaken in this deck? And he's like, oh, I don't care about being awakened. Like I can just keep attacking you and make you discard cards. And I'm like, didn't you see what just happened to you? I locked you out. Like you had like 4 energy, no cards for like all game. I'm like, you need to awaken no matter like, And it was like, he's like, yeah, I've never had that problem before. People always attack me. And I'm like, well, then they're just playing the game wrong.
Right.
It's very true.
I remember seeing in the group, like, I remember just seeing people post complaining about Broly and how they thought it was just going to be like, that was going to end up being the deck. And then, like, we eventually see, Dusty starts doing good with hand destruction at Gen Con. Like, I know that video was pretty much like, I would almost equate it to like a holy text when it came to people trying to play hand destruction. Like, that was the first place that I ever, like, saw a hand destruction deck list. And I remember being like, wow, like, this concept is, like, super strong. Just based on like my understanding of how important card advantage is, and like that's just the deck that can simply leverage it the best in the set one only metagame. And I definitely agree with like the playing blue in set one. Like it does feel like at the end of the metagame, like you either played blue in your deck or you didn't have access to strategies that were just incredibly important. Like Majin Buu being the only card that could just straight draw you a card when it came into play. Like just that was the only cantrip that you could play. Sensu Bean to make it so you didn't tap out. Like I think pretty soon, like after figuring out Awakening was good, you found out that tapping out was horrible because your opponent would just like wait, build up their resources, and get you when you tapped out. It's like just having like that, like Majin Buu, Sensu Bean, and like Whis' Coercion. Like we started splashing that in like 2 Jocos. Like the people around here called it the Blue 14. Like your deck just played those 14 cards. It didn't matter, and then like you built from there. Like it ended up just being like almost like that was just like a core package of your deck. And I think set one, it kind of feels like that. Like I think it's just a new game type of thing where, obviously the set one, like not every card's gonna see play, right? But I think like having like those engines where like red had the Vados engine and you had your aliens, blue you had a pretty good core of cards that you're gonna play if you're splash blue. Like all the blue splashable cards were kind of like a package deal. It felt like your Brolys and your card destruction, all those like your critical attackers, like they kind of always seem to be grouped together as well. And I think like it kind of just got stagnated to the point where like you felt like you were just like you're kind of just like playing with Legos, right? You're just let me get the blue package, let me get this over here, let me just build my deck out of these 2 components. And it'll be interesting to see. To me, I really want to see if Europe innovates the metagame from where we started, because they're not starting completely fresh in a sense, because they have knowledge and builds to look at and deck lists to check out before like. It doesn't feel to me like they're going to be going in quite as cold as we were. So to me, it'll be just really interesting to see if you see anyone kind of like break the conventions of what like a main deck build was or what cards were considered good. I mean, we all know that like the whole like is objection a good card was like a huge thing in set 1 too. I know, Danny, that's like your favorite set 1 card. I remember just like you had people that just, objection's a bad card. If you play objection, you're a bad player. Like, if you play objection, do you just play 4 because like the card's horrible late game? Like, why would you ever want to play 4 of that card? And like I know Dusty, like your deck was huge. Like you wanted objection turn 2. Like you just wanted you wanted Broly objection to skip that turn 3 and then just go bio Broly, because the sooner you could cut them off of their cards to put them 0, the better position you were in. So. It's like, to me, I think objection in set 1 was just more of a if it fit your strategy, it was integral, and if it didn't, you probably didn't play it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, I think objection's a good card. I think, I'm in the believing that all the cards are good cards. It's like you just need a certain deck for it to run well. I actually hate when players or people say cards are bad, because I don't feel like they are. They're only bad in a certain context with when we're playing right now. But 2 weeks from now, those are the cards that are usually the better cards. And I always tease Jordan, I'm like, I'll be like, what do you think about this card? He'll be like, oh, I don't think it's that good right now. And I'm like, okay, well, wait until I play it. I always laugh about, like, the bad cards are usually the cards that are the most broken, honestly. I mean, I know when Jason the Mind Sculptor came out, everybody said he was terrible, and he was like, they were selling him for $10 from Star City or something, you know what I mean? Now he's like a $120 card or something. So, I mean, I feel like the most important advice I can give players for any game, especially Dragon Ball Super, is, try out different stuff. Try out different cards, make sure that you're looking at the cards. I agree with everything everyone said here. Blue is the best color in set 1 and probably still the best color in set 2. But definitely look at your cards. Make sure you're familiar with the cards. Danny touched on that as well. You don't ever want to be taken by surprise. The first set's really small, guys. It's like 110 cards or something. Is that right, or is that?
I think it's
around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very few cards, and so just get familiar with the cards and understand that set first. I know that a lot of European players just came to me has been like, Dusty, I hate that we're only getting one set. I feel like we're going to be behind. But honestly, guys, you want to get familiar with set 1 and then move into set 2. If you guys just got the game and they just threw 3 sets of cards at you guys, like, you'd be super overwhelmed. So, just take this time to learn those cards and play with them, and you'll be rewarded for it. Like, you're building the foundation to be a good Dragon Ball Super player.
I think it's important too. Sorry to cut you out there, Danny. I think it's important to like take your steps into the game. Like for me, starting the game with like the demo decks, that was like a very like narrow pool of cards, and like we didn't have things that self-awakened other than like Furious Sail Vegeta. So like learning that getting yourself awakened was huge. Like those decks had you had Family of Justice was in there, like the Son Goten. So like there was pieces of removal present in that deck, but there was no negates. There was no interaction really with your opponent's stuff. You didn't have Raging Attacker Vegetas or anything like that. So like I think just like kind of pacing yourself when you're learning the game, getting in. Set 1 especially, like you have things like the 10K, we like to call them 10K boost. I know some people have different names for them, whatever. You got your Dodoria, your Vados is red, I believe. The Kid Trunks is your green one. Your Boost Attack Piccolo is your blue. Those cards, like pretty much everyone, I'm pretty sure, like nowadays, most people seem to consider them just like staples. But like set 1, learning to play with those, just like those kind of things are important to learn. So like I would urge anyone that's starting the game fresh to like, ease into it. Don't just like dive into the deep end of 1, 2, and 3. Especially if you're playing tournaments where you're only playing in set 1. I know a lot of people when like new sets come out, like spoilers and stuff, a lot of people like to test right away. Like if I'm not someone that's going to go to an event like next weekend, I typically try to like not play with the spoilers and focus on the meta that I'm in. And I think like it's kind of important for people that are getting into the game, especially if you haven't been following it, you don't have any real like basis with it. I would definitely try to like focus on learning your fundamentals. I mean, just like anything else, like you gotta learn the basics in practice. But I definitely think like learning to play around negates and figuring out what cards people's decks tend to have, and what your deck struggles against is huge. And I think playing with like just the set 1 cards is a good way to start to get a feel for that. Like how often does my opponent end the game with 4 Whis' Coercions? Like, can I afford to attack here if all my attacks get negated? That kind of thing. I think is like huge, and like those were lessons that like you slowly learned when I was playing the game, was just learning those things one at a time. So I think jumping into like 3 sets of the game all at once and trying to learn those things is probably a little bit of a lofty goal for some people.
Yeah, like you kind of touched on what I was gonna say. Like basically, like I know they only have 1 set and they have a small card pool and stuff, but learn how to play the game before you worry about like all like the like building all the decks and stuff like that. Just get a basic a good knowledge of like all the fundamentals, like you were saying. Learn how to play the game first, then you can worry about all the other stuff. And I think that's good that they only got 1 set, because then they can learn how to play the game and they're not just getting 3 sets thrown at them and then here you go. and they don't know how to play the game because it would be very convoluted.
Right. Well, welcome to the Thunderdome. Here's the thing. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think are the are some of the core concepts? You said like learn how to play the game, Jordan. Like, what do you think? Like, what would you like? What can you do to like help them learn faster?
Set 1, it was very basic. It was Awakening was number 1. I mean, I think everybody that played the game a little bit figured out that there's ways to stop you from awakening, so they'll do that to starve you of cards. So you have to learn how to awaken. I think like every deck played some sort of negate package. You have to run some sort of negates to protect yourself late game from a bunch of attacks. Those two are the main things. I mean, just like playing in sequence, knowing when to stop attacks, like when to go all in is also another big one. You don't want to go all in too early and just be left defenseless on your turn. Some of those were the main things to just learn how to do those well, and then you can branch out into like other decks and worry about other cards and stuff like that.
How about you, Danny? You have any tips from Canada?
Yeah, a big tip is actually, I got this question a lot too. Is knowing when to attack with your leader at least, and for the most part, it's unless you're Vegeta or Brawly, I guess, because you can attack early. Just never attack with your leader unless it nets you something. Unless there's a reason you're attacking. Like with Beerus, if there's something on the board and you want to get rid of it, sure, you can attack because at least you're killing something off the board. You know, Vegeta has his crits, Brawly has his discards, but if you're playing leaders that don't really have an attack on their flip side, that really nets you an advantage, you really just have to wait till you're awakened. So at least when you attack, yes, you're giving them a card, but you're at least getting a card back for it, so your attacks are at least netting you something, whereas on Awaken, your attacks don't really net you any kind of advantage. It kind of just gives your opponent... It's like, sure, they get closer to dead, but that will come. Like, the game will go to the point where they will eventually be dead if you're playing it right. So you don't need to attack early, which was a big thing that even to now, I still see a lot of people doing. It's like people are just attacking me, and I'm like, sweet, bunch of free cards, thank you, you know, like...
Exactly. Yeah. A perfect example of that is Ginyu in set 1. Like I swear, like I think people like just didn't like, they were just like using their power to take a card and then attacking their opponent. And it's like at that point they're playing Ginyu 2 without having to play Ginyu. Yeah. So like you kind of just like gotta wait till you're awakened to start attacking. That way you at least draw your card. Yeah. They get a card, but you get a card. It's fair. Yeah. It's not fair, but it's fair.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, on top of that, and that means you need to put cards in your deck to do something that isn't attacking. So like that's why Boo I think is such a good card, because you know if your opponent's awakened, you don't want to attack them, but you can at least play a Boo and cycle a card and get something, get a little bit of defense, you get a card out of it. You know, same thing with like Prince of Speed is another reason why that card was played a lot too. You can just play them out, draw 2 cards, like you can keep delaying until you can dig either for your results or you know wait until your opponent has to attack you to get value out of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the same reason that like blockers weren't good either, is because in set 1 they didn't do anything besides divert an attack, in which case you just lost a card. And really set 1, like the story of the game for me at least was just like it was all about card advantage. And like I know Matt Coombs like to use the term card parity, and like that was something that like I was trying to use like to teach people is like really watch how you're spending your cards, because it was really like apparent to me when I was teaching people too that like once they got the concept of comboing, they're like, well, like, why would I not want to just, like, dump all my cards and make you take damage? And it's like, well, the defender gets the last say, so if you dump your whole hand, they're just going to take the damage. If you put 2 cards in a comboing and they don't use any, they get a card, like, you just basically discarded 3 cards. Like, you really got to, like, watch what you're doing, and you need to be having a reason for everything you are doing. And I think that's definitely something that you want to pay attention to when you're playing, is what is my opponent doing? Are they making moves that put them at card disadvantage? How can I respond in a way that gives me the least disadvantage or the greatest upside, right? So to me, that was the entire like learning how to play in a way that maintained your presence and denied your opponent resources that was pretty much what I learned from set 1. And that's kind of why I focused on hand destruction for today's episode, was just getting the idea of like, to me, set 1, the whole thing was just how can you handle your cards, and how can you put your opponent in a way where they have to get rid of their cards.
Yeah, no, I mean, I say all the time what it is, but hand size is king. I absolutely believe that. Hand size is king, and then critical is queen. So I always like to say, I feel like those are the 2 biggest things in set 1 is, keeping your hand size up, make sure you're not wasting cards on stupid stuff, and then, trying to avoid critical as much as you can, because you don't want to lose those cards. You want to draw them when you can. So The one thing you don't want to do though is I've seen a lot of people drop like 2 cards to stop 1 critical, and it doesn't make sense because you're essentially netting, like you're using 2 cards to stop you yourself from losing 1 card, which doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, hand size is absolutely king, and I tell a lot. Well, usually what I do, I know like Danny's really good at this, and so is Jordan. Is when I teach players the game, I'm like, well, when you're attacking, you're trying to figure out if you can go for game or not. Just like count the cards in their hand, and then like try to like calculate, like make it a math problem. Like they have 5 cards in hand and 1 open mana. They can do 1 10,000, the other 4 have to be 5,000. So the most they can do out of their hand is like 10. And then another 10 off the 2 cards, and another 10 off the other cards. So they can go up to 30,000 in their hand, essentially. So if you combo over 30,000, you should be good. Unless they have Jocos, unless they have Piccolos, that's a whole different thing. I mean, you're never going to be able to completely figure it out, but it's just kind of a cool basis to go.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Pay attention to their energy and their drop zone, because there's times where it's like you see them early games, like whatever their hand may be, but they would energy like their boost tech Piccolo, and I'm like, ooh, that's bad. And I'm like, that can't be the right play, but whatever. And then that's there, and then you see them use it in their graveyard too. So it's like, okay, so the maximum possibility they could have is just if they're super lucky, they can, like Dusty was saying, they have 1 untapped, they can drop 1 10K. They only have 2 more Piccolos in their deck, so it's like, so the max potential they could probably do is this number. Now, if I'm wrong, then this is the max, and if I can beat that number,
it's safe to just dump.
That I win. If I can't beat that number, I just have to be wrong about like 1 or 2 cards, and I could probably still win. Like I'm probably like they'll probably have at least 1 extra in there that they can't combo. They'll probably have at least this or that, But it does mess up your math with all the when they can like Sensu and unlock another one, or they can Jacko, or they can.
There's plenty of stuff. That's what I like about this game. I like that you have to play around so many different things. It's fun. It's fun to see everybody just being kind of afraid to pull the trigger. You know what I mean? Everyone's like afraid to try to kill each other. So yeah, I like it a lot.
So we touched on a lot of things I had down here. One thing I did want to make note of is, we still say now, and like green doesn't have many good 3-drop attackers. But energy boost is energy attack go tanks.
It's freaking go tanks. Here we go.
Yeah. I know.
Cards, holy crap! That card's so annoying.
Fake news.
Yeah, from like the days of the demo deck, even like he was in there, and he seems so good in there just because you could bully. Like he was a threat the entire game.
He's a bully.
like best case scenario, they were just chucking a card to just basically blind draw one of their life cards. So it seemed like that was like the safest attacker in the demo decks and stuff. And like all the early decks I built that were green, just like that was like the first card I put in. It was just like it seemed so good for a 3-drop. Then you could even evolve it for 4 if you were playing Super Saiyan Go tanks, and like it just seems so good. And I know nowadays like people are starting to play it even probably more commonly than they did in set 1 for a lot of times. Now that people realize how good it is to pressure like Awakened Leaders when your opponent can't afford to take damage. Like that card alone basically attacks, and it just like nets. It takes 2 cards from your opponent's hand.
I hate that card. I'm gonna tell you. Okay, so here's what's gonna happen. We're gonna have this awesome discussion about this card because Danny really likes this card. I hate this card, and I feel like Jordan's in the middle. And like, I absolutely hate this card. I feel like it's not that good. I feel like I feel like it's a trap. Like it's a freaking trap. Every time I see this guy come out, because like if you play him early, okay, then you attack into me, and I just take the hit. I'm just like, okay, I'll take it, and I have to dump a card, but I get another card back. And we just talked about how it's really important not to awaken your opponent.
Yep.
Like, so it's like it's essentially you have to like awaken your opponent, try to get advantage out of it. Now, if you are awakened, sure, the card's annoying because you're like, oh, here we go. Like this stupid little dude like comes out, and I have to like dump a card and save my like life. So like that's like when it's good, right? But like I feel like in set 1, and like you guys back me up here, but I feel like you almost always skip your 3-drop. Like in set 1, it's almost like turn 2 objection, and then I'm gonna do like stuff on 4. You have like Beerus, and you have your Bio Broly's, and you have like your Mecha Freezes. Like there's just so many more. Like your 4-drops are more important in set 1 than I think 3-drops are. And I think that's even still the same now.
Yeah,
especially with Gohan.
I think green just doesn't have very many good 3-drops in general. So like maybe it's just a bias where like Gotenks is the best green 3-drop, and like the best green 3-drop is still worse than some 3-drops probably. But like
I think the best 3-drop is Gotenks just. Like in general, like I mean, I think like even in set 2, I think he's still the best 3-drop. I just don't think 3-drops are good.
Yeah, they're other than like obviously like ability unleash Gohan is like that's some premier 3-drops right there. But yeah, like green, like you don't really have a 3-drop spot. So I think with all the green blue decks, like maybe that is the reason the objection is just the play in those decks was like 4 was just like the sweet spot. Like you have so many good 4-drop Furious Yell, Raging Attacker Vegeta, You got your Broly Evolve on 4. Like, probably was kind of just that you just want like 3Js in the spot you want to be at. So that's probably true. But
Now here's the thing about the 3-drop part is I do believe objection is like the ultimate turn 2 play. However, and like I think the play now that set 2's out is like objection into a Kale, and if you can resolve your Kale and kill their board and then start netting off her right away, and they can't, and like unless they want to, the only thing to really get rid of it is a Gohan, or you want to Kale your Kale, kill your Kale to rip their Kale out. That's probably like the premier play, I think, because you can't, no one can really OTK you when you're on your turn like 3 play unless they've been aggro on you. However, against certain decks who can OTK you that quickly, you never want to tap out. So your turn 4 play, unless you're playing Whis to get an energy, there is no real turn 4 play without tapping out. So that's where you can play your Gotenks or your turn 3 play, so you have at least 1 energy up, and you can start chipping other life. However, like you said, I don't like actually attacking. I don't really like having my Gotenks out there from their lives from 5 to 8, because like you said, they're cycling bad cards for good cards.
Right.
And he really just comes into play late game. And then again, if you're playing him in a deck that's not yellow, like the Ginyu or these mechas now, it's actually hard because like if you don't get him off the board for more, like if he's on the board for more than 1 turn, you're probably losing that game. And yellow is the only thing that can really protect him. So it's maybe
he lasts like it's the game, but like not really, right? Because for him to stay on the board more than 1 turn, you have to dump cards too, right?
Well, it's just like the only thing if you play him in anything else that's not yellow, you play him, you attack, you do your thing, and they just kill card him. But you can Cobalt list it. Now you Cobalt list it. They're like, okay, fine, I'll attack into him. Then if you're yellow, you're like, okay, I combo into play the Frieza. Now you have 2 15 things to annoy with, and they're like, oh shit. Okay, they attack into again. Oh, sorry, another 15k Frieza. It's like, oh god damn it. And now you spent all this time trying to kill that Gotenks, not putting pressure on their leader, and now they just ripped out 2 Friezas and a Gotenks. They on top, they throw another Gotenks down, and then now what? It's like Cobalt, like in yellow decks, and like playing Gotenks in other decks is kind of hard because he comes up for 1 turn, you have to kill card him, and then it's just that's all he's good for. That's why I've been going away from him for some of my decks, but in the yellow, like these Mecha Frieza decks, he's hit like having all those 3-drops out there, like, and being able to protect, especially with these new combo into play cards, it's ridiculous. It's probably
plus Goten's played in almost every deck too, I think, which makes them a lot worse as well.
Oh yeah, and then actually that Goten is really like you either have to have a bunch in your side or your main, because there are so many good 3-drops that need to be killed.
Yeah, I'm like in the middle here, honestly. Like
I know that's what's so exciting. It's like,
or like set 1 to set 2, like. It's like 2 things. I'm like in the middle right now, but like even then, like set 1 to set 2. Set 1, I really like 3-drops. I don't know, they just seemed really good. There wasn't as much stuff to play either, so they were just like kind of like the best thing you could play. And like energy power Gotenks, like even early, they're making them discard a card. Like in the Ginyu deck, you're making them discard a card, but you're also like, letting them, like you're still killing them. Like you're still essentially netting something. Just like when you swing with your Awakened leader, like you're giving them a card, but you're also getting a card. As long as you're, keeping that card parity, like you're saying, like Matt says. But now in set 2, I don't really like them as much because number 1, they're harder to keep alive. There's better cards to be playing in your deck, and there's like Gotens everywhere. Yeah, everybody is playing Goten in the main or side. I mean, me included. I mained it because I was like, there's too many good 3-drops that you can play. Then there's Cell, and Cell, like they're basically just dead against Cell in the early game, so you're never gonna be able to play them early game. Yeah, just right now, I don't know. I'm just not huge on 3-drops. Gotenks is probably the best one, but every time I look to try and put in my deck, I'm just like, I don't want to play this card.
Right, exactly. And I'll tell you something else too. That like 3-drops pair up really well with Kel, because like usually your opponent will have like a Boo, and then like a Kel, right? And so like that's like perfectly 5, right? Or like if they have like a Goku, you can go like Gotenks Goku, and that's 5. You know what I mean? Like 3-drops just like they help you get more value out of Kel than like you normally would be able to. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, that's why I think like yellow's like the only real deck that can really afford to play them, like Danny was saying, because they can protect them somewhat against Kale mainly, but against like just like spot removal. But you can't protect them against Goten, and like I don't know, I feel like everybody's running Goten. I don't really get blown out. Like one of my matches this weekend, like my opponent was relying on an Android 16 to win the game for him, and like I sided in Goten, I just killed it, and he was just like, "You can't be serious."
Yeah, it's rough. Goten is I have like a love-hate relationship with Goten right now. Like the card set 1 to me was like it was like pretty much sideboard staple in most of our circles of play. Like we didn't start to main deck. Like we started main deck 2 once hand destruction was like kind of like the deck, right? Because you just need to kill the Broly. It's like if your deck didn't have ways to destroy like kill the Broly, like if you were playing green, then you just like play full powers and like your opponent can play around it. So at some point we just decided, okay, well like I need to kill this Broly before they can evolve, or I need to kill this Kind Saiyan Son Goku before it goes to like the SS3 4 drop to close the game, right? So we started playing like main deck 2 Son Gotens. Some of us played them in the sideboard and stuff, and like we realized that card was pretty good. And like once we got Mighty Mask, and especially now with the new support coming out and like the deck box set for like the Gotenks engine and stuff, like I don't think Family of Justice is going to go down at all. Like it's just going to be in more and more decks. And I've been playing a lot of blue-green androids recently, and like just to play your promo, just knowing that they probably have Family of Justice in their deck is just like so rough sometimes. And like I've just like cut Android 16 out of the main boards of most of my decks because like at like game 1's the only place I feel like you're getting value a lot of the time, and like it's cool because you can search for it if you're playing androids or Cell with your 20. But like a lot of the time, like they can just afford to kill it with a Goten, and it's just like you don't want to tap out for 3 to play it just to get Goten. So like I feel like 3 drops a lot are just losing viability because it's just like you're setting yourself up for the biggest possible blowout if they have the Goten. And it just like it feels bad. So like if you can't protect your 3 drops, it's just like really hard to get much value out of them with so many Gotens floating around. Really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about Goten is he's actually terrible if you don't have a target to like for him to use on, especially off like off color decks. So if someone's playing like blue red and like you just don't play a 3 drop, it makes it really hard for them to get value because it's a 1 cost 5,000 like buff or whatever. So like that's been one thing that like at regionals at Richmond, like I had Android 16s in my sideboard, and we talked about that, Jordan, when we talked about the deck sideboard, and I never sideboarded them in because like my opponent's just gonna put Goten in, and it's gonna be a waste. So I was like, this is stupid. I'm just not gonna do it. And so like I don't know. Did you feel the same way or?
I was just gonna say like sometimes you can metagame your opponent too. Like I know a few rounds my opponent like the Android 16 would be a good sideboard card if they weren't running Goten. So like what I did was like I didn't side it in game 2, but like if we had a game 3, I would side it in game 3, and then they would see it and they'd be like, "Well, shit, I sided out my Gotens." Like,
yeah. Yep. Yeah, we're on like the level 2 now. Yeah.
But yeah, it's still it's really not that great of a card, honestly, just because like you said, like Goten's just a huge blowout, and my opponent was really like he was playing Mecha Frieza, so he was banking on like if I play kill card, I just Cold Ballast it, play kill card, Cold Ballast it. Android 16 literally won him a game 2. Like I played 4 kill cards in a row and he Cold Ballast all of them. So so I knew that was his strategy going in to beating Soul Striker, so I just sided my Gotens and I got him.
Get there, Goten, baby, Family of Justice.
But, yeah, dude. He was nuts every time I played him in Connecticut too. Like I mainboarded him in Connecticut and he was just nasty.
I know, man. He is good
right now.
The fact you can search him out with Mighty Mask is just absurd too. Like I don't know.
Also.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sad. I might have to find a new deck. I've been playing a lot of blue-green androids, and I think the deck's like super good. But like, I just know people are gonna play the new Trunks where you can like when you attack reveal to KO, and like if you just reveal Family of Justice, you can just combo and like start like board wiping decks that play a lot of 3 drops. It's like I've been playing it. My deck mainly is like a combo kill out of hand where like you'll just spend 3 mana to play like your Android 18. You'll like attack Senzu Bean, play the other one, and like just like combo KO. Which is cool because you're not susceptible to just removal blowing you out like you would be in like the red-green version. But it's just like getting so rough with how many like Gotens are coming around, and like that Trunks giving you just like double Goten value is just nuts. So like, assuming people are gonna have that in the sideboard and be hype on Gotenks, which I think is probably the case, like, yeah, it's gonna be a rough time to be trying to rely on like revenge blockers, I think, for a while too, just because they're gonna get hated out by the same type of things.
I think the important thing to remember is that Danny is wrong about Gotenks being a good card.
Yeah, right.
I think that's something that we established. So
it's probably one of the most powerful cards.
yeah, you're right. In the demo deck, you're correct.
It was nasty in the demo deck.
You can evolve. You can evolve on top of him. Evolve on top for 4, untap 2, then attack with Soul Striker, untap 2. Whoo, pure value.
Here we go.
Here we go.
All of Daddy's like scenarios where Gotenks is good. It's like the most magical Christmas. You play to kill my guy. I have cold bloodlust, and then I play out Frieza. And he attacks again. I play out Frieza. It's like, oh wow, okay.
Trust me, I've had that happen to me a lot. That it's very common, very common.
Oh boy.
To be fair, Dusty, I think he's probably like at the very least he's probably tied for the worst Gotenks. Like, granted, it seems like Bandai likes Gotenks to the point where like most of them are pretty good, but like the red dual attack, he might be, you know, about the same level as Gotenks. That's considerably below Super Saiyan and the new one in my book, but
yeah, there's two better in this game. That is Gotenks and Goku leaders. Those are, like,
oh god, don't get me started.
For sure.
Oh my.